Hi everyone, and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the lens selection process. How do I pick a lens for photographing a particular subject? Here I have three of the most popular Sony lenses for photographing birds. The Big 6, the 600 f4, the 300 2.8, and the newly released 4 to 800. So I've reviewed all these three lenses before, with the exception of the 600 f4. At some point I'll review that. But I've published reviews for both the 4 to 800 as well as the 300 2.8. You can go to my channel and watch the video reviews for the 300 2.8 and the 4 to 8 if you're interested. But now let's say you have all of these lenses and you're wondering which one you would pick for a given job. Which one would give you the best results? Usually I tend to reach out for my 600 f4 as my go-to lens, and that is because this lens is incredibly sharp, really fast to focus, and fast aperture. If I need to get to 800 millimeters or even 1200 millimeters, I can do it with this lens, and hand holding it is not a problem for me. But there are situations where I can't physically take this lens when I'm traveling or going to places where you can't take this. If you're flying on small aircraft or going somewhere in a small kayak or something where this is like too big to take, then obviously you can't take it. But today I want to talk about for a particular situation where you can actually take any of these lenses. I could have taken any of these. Travel was not a factor there, and the size of the lens was also not a particular factor. So I had access to all three of them, and in this case I want to talk a little bit about what went into my thought process and how I ended up choosing the 300 2.8 between the three. Well, a few months ago I photographed peregrine falcons in a location in Southern California. There are a few locations there that are popular for photographing peregrine falcons, and I like these birds. They're one of my favorite raptors. I like to photograph them and I like to watch them, and in a couple of locations in Southern California are ideal for photographing these birds. Falcons usually like to nest on the cliffs near the ocean, and you typically either have to shoot them from the beach or you have to photograph them from above the cliffs. Photographing them from down below usually is not preferable. There are some locations where you can get really great shots, but generally speaking, you don't want to be at pointing your lens at a steep angle towards the sky and shooting from underneath. That's not an ideal situation unless they're coming and landing on the beach, which is quite rare. It has to be a very secluded beach for them to come down. But otherwise, you want to photograph them from a higher vantage point where you can get the top side banking shots and basically get them against the background other than sky. And that's usually the kind of shot that you want to get if you're after photographs that are aesthetically pleasing. In terms of light, this is a morning place. Obviously, when shooting on the coast, depending on whether you're on the East Coast or on the West Coast, it's a different situation. So if you're shooting on the West Coast in the afternoon, you're going to be shooting towards the land, pointing your lens away from the water. Or if you want to photograph birds that are on the water, in this case like on the cliffs flying towards and back towards you from the ocean side, it'll be a morning shot. And more often than not, this location is a little cloudy in the mornings. There's a morning marine layer that's always present, so it's pretty much a low light situation. So when you start, you're starting pretty high ISO. In this case, and that practically rules out the 4 to 800. This lens is, for all practical purposes, an f8 lens. You go past like 600 millimeters, already f8. So this is too slow for that situation. You gotta be shooting like 10,000 ISO or 8,000 ISO is not ideal. And also, if you're shooting high ISO, you want a lens that is really, really sharp. And in the review of this lens, I point out that the sharpness of this is not on par with the primes. So high ISO combined with, sharpness that is okay, but not great, will not get you really good results in that location. So this one is out pretty quickly. But between the 600 f4 and the 300 2.8, you might think that the 600 f4 would be a better choice in that case, because the flight range is about 600 millimeters. So you have to use this with the 2XTC, and at that point this is f5.6 versus the 600 is f4. So it's one stop faster, which is, you know, if you're shooting 2000 ISO with this one, you're going to be shooting 4000 ISO with this. So, and also this one is incredibly fast to focus. It's really nice to handhold. And this one is also very fast to focus. But all things considered, you might think that this would be the best choice for that particular location. And in the past, I've used many different lenses and camera systems in this location over the past more than a decade that I've been shooting there. So I've tried all kinds of different camera types and different lenses and different focal lengths, starting with the Canon EOS 1D series with 600, 500, 400 DO, 300, all of those lenses, and then later Nikon D5 series and Nikon lenses, and now with Sony. So I have some experience shooting with different lenses specifically. Now the camera body is a different subject, but different lenses and different focal lengths. And I've also shot that location with the Sony 2-600 one time. So I'm in a position to make a comparison between these, because the subject is more or less the same, the conditions are more or less the same, and the only variable is the lenses that I've been using. Okay, so why do I think that overall this lens with a 2XTC might be a better choice than the 600 f4? There's an interesting reason for that. In this particular location, as I mentioned, when you're photographing falcons, you're at a high vantage point and they perch on the cliffs, and you don't see them when they perch. Usually, sometimes there's a steep angle. You have to get really close to the edge of the cliff, which may not be a great thing to do, but basically you don't have a vantage, from your vantage point, you can't really see them when they're like perched in the cliffs, and therefore you don't know where they're gonna pop. They could be popping right in front of you, or they could be popping like 100 yards away, depending on where they've perched. And then they basically go up and down, so they get occluded by the cliffs and the foreground quite a bit. So it's very erratic. The distance, the shooting distance is very, very erratic, and it can vary significantly in this location. When you're shooting something different, for example, I photograph, let's say like a red-tailed hawk that's going to dive on a prey. In that case, you see where it is and you kind of anticipate where it's going. So the shooting distance, you can plan for that, starting from, let's say, 30 yards away, and it's going to land 20 or 15 yards away and then take off. So you have the subject in your field of view all the time. You can see it. You see where it goes and you can follow it. But in this particular location for the falcons, they pop and let's say they bank and then they just dive down or they go down again, and you don't see them. And you don't know where they're going to come up next or what kind of action is going to happen. And what that means is that you have to be really, really quick in pointing your lens in random directions. So I mentioned before that this lens I can handhold this, is not a problem. That is to say, it's relatively easy to handhold and move it. But then again, consider the size and the weight. Once it's up, it's easy to basically pan. But if you are to point this at a random location rapidly, like you're standing, you can't be like holding the lens like this for an hour. Everybody will get tired. And you don't want to set it on a tripod, because then you're anchored to one point, and for random action that's not going to be a good strategy. You will miss a lot of shots. So basically you have to, in this case, be able to randomly and rapidly point your lens at different locations and get on a moving target. And for that reason, this little lens here, this 300 2.8, this is much, much easier than the 600 f4. Again, it's not so much about having the strength to handhold this, like this, holding it steady or moving it or panning with it. That's not the difficult part. The difficult part is that when this is resting on the ground or it's hanging by your shoulder, you have to rapidly raise this to your field of view, to your line of sight, and you have to basically at the same time follow like a moving subject. And that part with this lens, because of its inertia, its weight, and its just bulk, is a lot more difficult than doing it with this little lens here. And this one, because when you're, let's say this is also hanging by your shoulder on the ground, you raise it rapidly because the mass is not as much, it doesn't have as much inertia and torque, so you can move and stop. Versus with this one, when you're basically raising it, you might overshoot, you might just like go up a little bit, and you know, this field of views are narrow, so you may basically overshoot your subject. And then if you don't lock on your subject in an instant, literally like half a second, you have about half a second or less, then it's gone. Then you can't find it anymore because it's flown in a random direction, and you're, by the time you get back on it, the action may be over, or it may just like be flying away from you, or it may be like going back down. So it's very difficult. If you get on it, then you can follow with this guy pretty well, and you can get a lot of good shots. And I've done that many times. But that initial half a second or 250 millisecond that you got to raise and lock, that's where this one makes a difference. And even though this one, you have to settle for a higher ISO, and you know, with the 2XTC, this is a pretty sharp lens. You can watch my review, but obviously it's not as sharp as a prime 600 f4. There is like a big price difference between the two, and it shows in the files. But this is still pretty sharp. It doesn't have a problem making really sharp photographs, as you'll see in the samples. But that instantaneous, aiming at random directions and being able to like find and lock on your subject in that like half a second that you have with this lens is a game changer, and will get you shots that basically even this lens may not be able to. Even if you're very experienced in hand holding and you can like swing this lens, it is still basic laws of physics. You know, it's got a lot more mass and inertia, so when you want to like aim and stabilize for the first time, it's not going to be as easy with this lens as it is with the 300 2.8. So basically for this kind of situation where you need not just sharp and not just fast to focus, but a rig that is incredibly agile for aiming, this one, in my opinion, could be the best option for these conditions. Of course, if the birds are perched, there's no movement, there's no initial lag or delay in aiming your lens, or none of that. You can just aim and photograph at your pleasure. And in that case, the 600 f4 is a better option because, as I mentioned, this is a f4, one stop faster. You can drop your ISO, and it's really sharp too. But you know, most of the time there's a mix. You want to be able to take some perch shots, and you also want action and flight. So if you consider both, I think still the 300 2.8 with the 2XTC will yield more results in this condition. So this was a particular condition where from your vantage point you don't have line of sight of the falcons, but it also extends to other similar situations. For example, if you're trying to photograph birds that are perched on the ground and you don't know exactly where it's going to pop from, like there's some foreground vegetation or something, and they're hidden behind it, and then you're just going around looking for something, and then something randomly pops out, and again you have like a split second to basically aim, acquire, and then start to track. Then again, this lens may perform better than something like the 600 f4 because of that initial rapid basically swinging to aim at the subject without overshooting it and basically landing on it accurately. That might be more challenging. It is certainly doable, but the odds of being able to pull that off with this lens is significantly lower than something like this. And that's obviously when the focal length for the subject is no longer than 600 millimeters. If it's longer than that, obviously this tops out at 600 with the 2x, then you won't be able to get a good shot because you have to crop too much. And the other thing is, if the subject is farther and farther, when it moves by a certain distance in angular terms, the angle change is not as much. So basically swinging this and finding the subject with this might not be that difficult because the subject is quite far from you. So in those conditions, the 600 will win. But in this particular condition that the subject is right about, I would say 600 millimeter focal length, that means it occupies between 30 to maybe 60-70% of the frame. 70% of the frame is actually too big for flight because most of the frame will be the subject. There will be no background or anything. But something in the order of 30 to 50% of the frame at 600 millimeters. If the subject is at that distance and it's super erratic, by erratic I don't mean erratic when it's flying. If it's flying against the sky, you know where it is, you can maybe track with the 600. Erratic, by erratic I mean you don't know where it's going to pop from, where it's going to appear first, and then it's going to disappear again. Then basically this lens can do wonders, and that would be great. Could be a great option for you to use, even if you have the 600 f4 in your bag. And that's the reason I chose this one. So in this particular condition, the 300-2.8 is the winner. You might ask that, are there any conditions where I would actually pick up this 4-800 over these two lenses? As I mentioned in the review, this lens is not as sharp as either one of these, is not focusing speed is not as fast, and basically it's not, in terms of quality, not comparable to the two. But there are some situations where this lens can literally get you a shot and these two cannot. And in future videos, I'm gonna talk about those particular conditions and give you some examples of when you might actually want to use this when you can take all three lenses. So before I end, I want to use this opportunity to introduce a new guide that I just finished writing with R.T. Morris. It's called the Q Essential Guide to Birds in Flight Photography. And this guide applies to all the photographers. It's brand agnostic, so whether you're shooting with Nikon, Canon, Sony, Olympus, or whatever, the tips and tricks discussed there will be applicable to you. And it covers all the basics and goes all the way to very advanced concepts about the behavior of different species, the condition of the field, and a lot of very intricate detail about the avian subjects and birds in flight photography that it's unlikely you find anywhere else. So if you're interested, please head over to my site and take a look. And with that, I want to thank you for watching this video and stay tuned for future videos.